This lesson is on conjugating all verbs into the present tense. In the previous lesson, we learned about the existence of three types of Korean verbs: verbs, verbs, and hara verbs. And there are also irregular verbs, but we can worry about those later, much later. To determine which of the three types of verbs you have, start out with the infinitive form of the verb. You will recognize the infinitive form by its da ending. Once you have that, remove the da and take a look at what is now the last syllable. If the last syllable does not contain an a or an o, you have an verb. We learned about those in the last lesson. Check the link in the description if you want to learn verbs in the present tense. If the last syllable is ha, you have a hara verb. That's the next lesson. Or if the last syllable contains o or a but is not ha, then you have an a verb. And that's the type of verb that we'll be learning about in this lesson. We will be learning how to conjugate all verbs into the present tense. Let's use an example. Onda. It means to hug. The first step in conjugation is to cut off the da ending. The infinitive verb with the da cut off is called the root verb. Then we add a to the end. That's why they're called verbs, because we add an a. Ana. And there you have it, your present tense of the word hug. This is the casual form. Remember, Korean has three different levels of respect: casual, polite, and formal. And so there are three different ways to say a verb in the present tense. To make the polite form, we add yo to the casual form. Ana yo. To make the formal form of the verb, we start off with the infinitive and cut off the da. Then, if the last syllable ends in a vowel, we add nida to the end. Or, if the last syllable ends in a consonant, we add simnida. In this case, our root verb ends in a consonant, so we add simnida. On simnida. Let's look at some examples that have roots that end in a vowel. There are two vowels that an verb root might end in: a and o. Let's look at an example that has a root that ends in a first. Gotta, to go. As always, we begin by cutting off the da. Since our verb root already ends in a, this time we do not need to add an a to the root. So we're done. We have made the casual present tense of go, ga. And as usual, we make it polite by adding yo, ga yo. And the formal form, as I said before, adds simnida to roots that end in consonants and umnida to roots that end in vowels. Komnida. And there we have the casual, polite, and formal forms of the present tense of an verb which has a verb root that ends in a. So lastly, let's look at the case where the verb root ends in o. Let's use the example boda, to see. Step 1, remove the da. Step 2, because this is an a verb, add an a. Bo-a. And then, what happens next is these two vowels come together to make wa. Wa. That is our casual present tense of see. And just like before, we create the polite form by adding yo, bwa yo, and the formal form by adding mnida, bomnida. Let's summarize present tense verb conjugation. Cut off the da. Check that the last syllable contains o or a but is not ha. Look at the very last letter in the root verb. If it is a consonant, add a to the root to make the casual form. Add yo to the casual form to make it polite. Add simnida to the root to make the formal form. If it is an a, you don't need to add anything to the root to make the casual form. Add yo to the casual form to make the polite form, and add mnida to the root to make the formal form. If it is an o, add a to the root and then blend the o with the a to make wa. Add yo to the casual form to make the polite form. Add mnida to the root to make the formal form. As you can see, making the polite and formal forms is virtually the same. And making the casual forms is similar too. You're just adding "a" to the root and then vowels combine. Now let's move on to using these verbs to make two-word sentences. When we want to make two-word sentences, remember we do not need to change the verb depending on whether we are using first person, second person, third person, singular or plural speech. To say I see casually in the first person, the verb is the same as when you say you see, or Anna sees, or we see, or they see casually. No need to change the verb at all. But one thing we should add to these sentences are subject markers. A subject marker is a suffix that is added to the end of the subject of the sentence. The subject is the thing that is doing the verb. There are two types of subject markers. The type that puts extra emphasis on the subject, ga or e, and the type that puts extra emphasis on the action, nun or un. Subjects that end in vowels get either a nun or a ga subject marker, and subjects that end in consonants get an un or e subject marker. We learned about subject markers in the last lesson. If you saw that, then this is review. Let's use our example ga to illustrate how we use these subject markers. Nanen ga, nega ga. Both of these sentences mean I go. The first one means I go, with the emphasis on go, when you're making it clear that you are definitely going, not staying, not doing anything else, going. The second one means I go, with the emphasis on I, to make it clear to everyone that it is I who is going. Not you, not you, not you, I. I am the one going. Now, why did I change na to ne in this sentence? Well, when you use a ga subject marker, ja turns into j, na turns into ne, and n turns into ne, but is pronounced ni, so it doesn't get mixed up with ne. These subject markers are meant to make it clear who is doing the action. In a short sentence like I go, you may see the subject marker omitted. You will also see the subject marker nun shortened to just n in unofficial forms of communication. Remember as well, Korean is a pronoun drop language. If you see a verb all by itself, the implied subject is I, or whatever subject was used in the previous sentence. I'm providing you with a list of all verbs in the infinitive form that you can practice conjugating if you like. Conjugated forms and their pronunciations are in the comments section. If you're going to memorize some of them, I highly recommend that you memorize them in the infinitive form so that you don't need to memorize them all over again when we learn past and future conjugation. All these things are linked in the description, and 안녕히 계세요, my fellow students, and thank you for studying with me.